Good morning. The hearing board of the South Coast Air Quality Management District is in session. It is Thursday, October 26, 2017. The time is approximately 9:05 a.m. We are meeting in Diamond Bar in the hearing board room, and we have one change to the schedule today. Thumbs Long Beach Company's case number 2515-20 for an interim is off calendar, and we have one matter on calendar for today, and that is Chevron Products Company case number 831-388. It's for a regular variance. And who is representing Chevron today?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. It's Christopher Norton of Latham & Watkins representing Chevron Products Company in this matter.
Thank you. Good morning. And who is representing the executive officer today?
Good morning, Stacy Pruitt and Nicholas Sanchez for the executive officer.
Thank you very much. Let's just start, Mr. Norton, with your opening for today.
Would you like to swear in witnesses at this time or delay that?
We might as well do that since you mentioned it. And everyone who is planning to testify, including anyone who might be testifying for the public, please rise. Please raise your right hand. Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
And before I give my opening, Madam Chair, could I please ask or note that we have provided some additional exhibits
Yes.
for the hearing today? And could we please mark for the record the exhibits that are set forth in the petition?
Yes, let's do that. So we have exhibits 1 through 4 that are attached to the petition, and let's mark those exhibits as they are.
And in addition, we've passed out a small packet of 4 additional exhibits that you should have before you. We'd request that these be marked as petitioner's exhibits 5 through 8.
Okay, so we will mark, we have a colored, I guess, schematic diagram, which has some writing, new foundations, new vapor blowers in the lower right corner, and that will be exhibit number 5. We have a black and white schematic, and I cannot read what it says in the lower right corner, but since there are no...
It's a diagram of the portable carbon units that would be provided by Invent.
Thank
So that's why
you.
we have Invent in the corner.
And that will be, I'm giving away that I need reading glasses, and that will be exhibit 6. We have revised proposed regular variance condition, and we will mark those as exhibit number 7. And finally, we have a chart that is entitled Carbon Bed Installation, and we will mark that as exhibit number 8. Any other preliminary matters, Mr. Norton?
No, that's it.
I only have 1 page. Should there be 1 or 2 pages to?
Just one
to
page
exhibit
to
8?
that exhibit. Oh, that's where it went.
It's a bonus. Did you need it?
I was looking for that. No, I'm fine. Just when I
Okay.
was assembling the packages, I came up one short. That explains it. Thank you so much.
Mystery solved. Okay, Mr. Norton, now you're opening.
Thank you. Good morning. Chevron Products Company appears today seeking a regular variance from certain district rules and permit conditions to replace the carbon units at the Effluent Treatment Plant, or ETP. The subject equipment is located at the Chevron El Segundo refinery, which is a major producer of transportation fuels. The Effluent Treatment Plant, or ETP, serves to improve the quality of wastewater leaving the refinery. The ETP removes contaminants from the wastewater prior to its discharge directly into Santa Monica Bay. Continuous operation of the ETP is critical to the refinery. Without it, the refinery simply cannot run. The ETP is equipped with a regenerative thermal oxidizer, or RTO. This is an air pollution control device used to remove VOCs from tank T500 and tank T719 at the ETP. The RTO uses high temperature to destruct VOCs in the tank vapors. The ETP is also equipped with backup carbon units. This air pollution control device uses activated carbon to remove VOCs from the tank vapors. In normal operations, the RTO is in service. The carbon units are only used as a backup device if the RTO is down for any reason. Old-timers like me might refer to this as belt and suspenders. Chevron is now working to upgrade the ETP at the refinery to improve its efficiency. The ETP project involves the installation of a new pulverized activated carbon system, or PAC, that will remove more contaminants from the wastewater. This is a significant project for the refinery. The costs of the project are estimated at $65 million. The replacement of the carbon units is an essential part of the overall ETP project. The cost to replace the carbon units alone is estimated at between $6 and $7 million. Due to plot limitations, Chevron will need to construct the replacement carbon units in the same location as the existing ones. That's going to add to our timeline for the variance. Chevron is in compliance with relevant district rules and orders. However, Chevron will be out of compliance when the refinery takes the carbon units out of service for replacement. They're presently installed. District permitted portable carbon adsorbers will be installed prior to the removal of the existing carbon units. The portable carbon units will be connected to the tanks during the variance period. Like the carbon units, the portable carbon absorbers will be used to control VOC emissions from tanks T500 and T719, but only when the RTO is down, just like the carbon units. Recently, Chevron completed a major upgrade of the RTO. Spent a lot of time and money on it. The goal of the RTO work was to allow for a reliable 2-year run. The work has now been complete, and the RTO is back in service. Except for a short period of time when a new fuel meter is installed, Chevron anticipates that the RTO at the ETP will remain in service during the variance period. With mitigation, there will be no excess emissions in this matter. If the RTO is shut down for any reason, maintenance or a breakdown, then the vapors from the tanks will be routed to the portable carbon adsorption units. The portable adsorbers work as well or better than the carbon units at removing VOCs, thus no excess emissions with mitigation. Significant harm would result if the variance were not granted. Economic losses to the refinery would be in excess of $2 million a day. Moreover, emissions and flaring would likely occur since Chevron would be forced to shut down and restart refinery units with the ETP down. In comparison, there should be no excess emissions with mitigation if the variance in this matter is granted. The replacement work will start as soon as possible and will be completed by, we estimate, June the 5th, 2018. That's what we have in our project schedule, and you'll hear testimony on that later on in the proceeding. The date for completing the work is unknown, and project delays are common, particularly in these major projects. As such, Chevron asked for 60 days following the projected completion date for the variance period. To be clear, Chevron requested the variance period in this matter begin today and continue through August 4th, 2018. The actual timeline of the variance may be shorter, more than likely will be shorter. Chevron would notify the clerk and the district in writing when final compliance has been achieved. Testifying in support of the petition is John Fowkes. Mr. Fowkes is a field compliance specialist at the refinery. We also have with us other Chevron personnel. They have been sworn in and are available to answer questions as they may arise. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Norton. Ms. Pruitt, your opening, please.
I'll try that again. Currently, the district does not anticipate opposing the variance, provided that the recitation of facts is consistent with the facts as known to the district.
Thank you. Mr. Norton, can you please present your first witness?
At this time, I'd like to call John Fowkes to testify. Mr. Fowkes, could you please state and spell your name for the record?
My name, excuse me. My name is John Fowkes, John Fowkes.
Mr. Fowkes, are you testifying under oath today?
Yes, I am.
Are you familiar with air quality regulations?
Yes.
What's your current position at Chevron?
My title is Field Compliance Specialist,
My favorite question, how long have you been with Chevron?
37 years.
Are you familiar with the petition for regular variance that was filed in this matter?
Yes, I am.
And are you also familiar with the equipment that is the subject of this variance request?
Yes, I am.
Let's provide some background. What facility is the subject of today's variance hearing?
The Chevron El Segundo refinery, located in El Segundo, California, the refinery. The refinery is a major producer of transportation fuels. Processes at the refinery, including refining of crude oil and intermediates for gasoline, jet fuel, and diesel.
And just to clarify, so the ETP and the carbon units, everything we're talking about today is located at the El Segundo refinery, correct?
That's correct.
What equipment at the El Segundo refinery is the subject of the variance petition?
The subject equipment in this matter include the aeration basin, tank T500, spent caustic tank, tank T719, the regenerative thermal oxidizer, we call the RTO, that's number 707, and two carbon absorption units, V512A and V512B.
And this information set forth at paragraphs 6 of the written petition. Where is the subject equipment located, if we haven't hit this one already?
Yeah, as said, the subject equipment is located at the Chevron refinery in El Segundo, California.
And why does Chevron require a variance in this matter?
We need to replace the carbon units located at the effluent treatment plant at the refinery to increase the reliability of the adsorbers. And due to plot limitations, we will need to demolish the existing carbon units and construct the replacement units in the same location.
What's the primary function of the effluent treatment plant, or ETP, at the refinery?
The primary function of the ETP is to improve the quality of the refinery wastewater. The ETP removes contaminants from the refinery process water prior to discharge into Santa Monica Bay. The ETP utilizes the activated sludge unit to provide secondary stage aerobic biological treatment of the refinery process waters. Air is blown into the ASU for biomass respiration. The ASU biomass removes contaminants in the drain waters following the primary treatment.
Please describe the aeration basin, which is tank number T500.
T500 is a fixed covered tank with a capacity of about 1.5 million gallons. It is a large unit measuring 160 feet long, 106 feet wide, and 20 feet deep. T500 treats effluent waters for removal of ammonia and organic hydrocarbons. Wastewater from tank T500 is then routed to other ASU equipment for further treatment prior to being discharged.
And in just a moment, we'll be introducing exhibits that show photographs of this equipment, just to further clarify it. And those are located at Exhibit 2 of the petition, but we'll get there in just a minute. Please describe the spent costed tank, which is tank number T719.
T719 is a fixed roof tank with capacity of about 3,500 gallons. T719 is 10 foot high, 8 foot in diameter, and it's used to store our spent caustic prior to treatment and discharge.
Mr. Fawkes, please describe the RTO, which is located at the effluent treatment plant.
The RTO is a natural gas-fired regenerative thermal oxidizer with low NOx burner. High temperature is used in the RTO to break down the VOCs emitted from the wastewater. Unreacted air and vapor from tank T500 and tank T719 are routed to the RTO, number F707, for VOC destruction.
Mr. Fawkes, please briefly describe the carbon units.
The carbon units have a capacity of about 20,000 pounds each of activated carbon. The activated carbon is used to remove VOCs from the tank vapors. If the RTO is shut down for any reason, then the vapors would be routed to the carbon absorbers. This is the vapors from T500 and T719.
Is it fair to say that the carbon units are used to back up the RTO at the ETP?
Yes, they are. The carbon units are used as a backup device if the RTO is down for any reason. The carbon units are required to be in service and to remove VOC from tank T500 and tank T719, but only if the RTO is down for maintenance or repairs.
Is there any time when the carbon units are in service and the RTO is in operation?
No, if the RTO is in service, the carbon units are in standby. As I testified, the carbon units are only used if the RTO is not in operation. We expect that the RTO will be in service during the variance period, except for a short period needed to install a new fuel meter at the RTO.
Will Chevron mitigate for excess VOC emissions for the ETP project?
Yes, district-permitted portable carbon absorbers will be rented and installed prior to the removal of the existing carbon units. The portable carbon absorbers will remain connected to the subject tanks during the variance period. Like the carbon units, the portable carbon absorbers will be used to control VOC emissions from tanks T500 and T719 when the RTO is down.
In a moment, I'm going to ask you to review the photos of the equipment exhibit number 2 for the hearing board members, but before we get there, will there be any excess emissions during the variance period?
No, with the use of the portable carbon absorbers, there should be no excess emissions. The portable absorbers work as well or better at removing VOCs than the existing carbon units. If the carbon absorbers are needed during the variance period because the RTO is down, the emissions from the tank should be lower than during normal operations.
At this time, I'd like to ask you to step up to the overhead projector, and we can look at some of these exhibits together. Mr. Fawkes, I'd like you to flip to the photographs which are listed in Exhibit 2 to the petition. And I see you have that in the overhead. This is it. Mr. Fawkes, is this first photograph a true and accurate representation of the carbon units at the refinery?
Yes, this is the existing V512A and V512B.
Could you please provide the board with information on the photograph?
Sure. You see it as one large box, but it's actually split in half. One half is A, one half is B, and there's a diversion valve here that can route to one side or the other. You may notice in the background this stack, that is this, excuse me, that's the stack of the RTO.
The RTO is a large unit, isn't it?
Yeah,
We're going to get there in a minute. Anything more in this photograph?
I don't believe so.
Okay, let's move on. Mr. Fawkes, is the second photograph in Exhibit 2 a true and accurate representation of the regenerative thermal oxidizer, or RTO, at the effluent treatment plant?
Yes, it is. This photograph was taken when it was first built, so that's when it was brand new.
It looks huge.
Rather huge, yeah. There's 3 active beds that the regeneration takes place, and then here's the stack of the RTO.
And this is the primary air pollution control device for the ETP?
For T500 and T719, yes.
Okay. Anything more to add on this photograph, Mr. Fawkes?
I don't believe so.
Okay, let's move on to the third photograph. Mr. Fawkes, is this third photograph in Exhibit 2 a true and accurate representation of the effluent treatment plant at the refinery?
Yes, it is. As you can see, it's taken from Google Earth, but it's, as I know, the ETP, the correct image.
Could you take a couple of minutes and walk us through this exhibit?
Yes. Tank T500, you see it has a concrete lid.
So you're on the far right side of the
Right
exhibit?
side, outlining it there. The tank T719, which is the spent caustic tank, is this small tank here. The existing carbon adsorber units, V512A and B, are this rectangle right there at the tip of the pin. And then down below that is the RTO. I may say that the rental carbon units that are coming in will be placed on the east side of tank T500, right along here.
That's close in proximity where the carbon units are located then.
Correct, yeah. And then this open space will be taken up with the pack unit that we'll talk about later.
The pulverized activated carbon unit?
That's correct.
And Mr. Fawkes, it looks like where the carbon units are presently located, that looks like a fairly tight space. Is that correct?
Yes, it is, and that's exactly where we want the new ones to be.
So we're going to put the carbon units in the same locations as the existing ones. You can't build them off to the side and route it over it, given this plot.
That's correct.
Okay. This is one of the reasons why we're asking for a lengthy variance period.
Wait a minute, Chair. Would you say indicate the carbon units where they're located again, when you point to them?
Sure. The existing carbon units are right there.
Hard to see, but it's that little square box with the two little rectangles on the top. Thank you. Mr. Fowles, is there anything more to add on this exhibit?
I don't believe so.
Thank you very much. I think we're done with that for now. Could you please return to your seat?
Did you want to see this one?
Oh, I'm sorry. There's one more left. Mr. Fowles?
Yes.
Thank you. Is this fourth and final photograph a true and accurate representation of one of the portable carbon adsorption units being rented from nVent?
Yes, it is, and obviously this is from another location, not brought in yet, but it's identical to what will be brought in. So this portion of that will have 20,000 pounds of carbon, and that we'll show later, and then 2 blower fans for each unit, and this piping here will be connected to T500, T719. I believe later we have another exhibit that'll show how that'll be done. There's actually 2 of these units that'll be set up.
We do have a black and white schematic showing how this unit would be set up at the ETP.
Correct.
Anything more to add, Mr. Fowles?
No.
When you come on back.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good job. Mr. Fowles, is the subject equipment essential to refinery operations?
Yes, continuous operation of the ETP is crucial to refinery operations. Without the ETP, the refinery cannot operate as designed. Operation of the ET is required to process wastewater from the refinery. The ETP is the final step of the process water before the wastewater is discharged into Santa Monica Bay.
Mr. Fowles, does Chevron hold a National Pollution Discharge Elimination System, or NPDES, permit for this equipment?
Yes, the separator is subject to NPDES permit, which allows for discharge of the wastewater following treatment directly to Santa Monica Bay. We are responsible for maintaining compliance with those fluent limits in the NPDES permit.
Hearing board members, we have a copy of the NPDES permit if anyone would like to see it. I don't think it's going to be that relevant to the proceeding, but we have one in case anyone wants to see it at some point. Thank you. Is Chevron the only refinery in this area that holds an NPDES permit, Mr. Fowles?
To my knowledge, yes. The El Segundo is the only refinery in the South Coast that holds an NPDES permit for wastewater discharge to Santa Monica Bay.
Mr. Fowles, I mentioned in my opening the ETP project for the El Segundo refinery. Could you please provide some testimony on what the ETP project is?
The ETP project involves upgrades to the effluent treatment plant at the refinery designed to improve its efficiency. For example, the ETP project involves the installation of a new pulverized activated carbon system, or PAC, PAC. The PAC will inject activated carbon into the wastewater. The activated carbon will then absorb and remove contaminants from the wastewater. The activated carbon will then be removed from the wastewater. Overall, the installation of the PAC will lead to a reduction of the contaminants in the refinery process waters prior to its discharge.
Is the ETP project essentially a pollution reduction project for the El Segundo refinery?
Yes, the sole purpose of the ETP project is to reduce pollution.
What's the cost estimate for the overall ETP project?
This is a major project for the refinery, and we currently estimate the cost at about $65 million. The final cost of the ETP project may exceed that amount.
Of the total ETP project cost, could you provide an estimate of the cost just to replace the carbon units at the refinery?
Yeah, the carbon units are estimated to cost between $6 and $7 million.
At this time, Mr. Fowles, I'd like to draw your attention to the exhibit that's been marked exhibit number 5. And could you please, yes, approach the overhead? Mr. Fawkes, is this diagram a true and accurate representation of the new carbon units that are going to be constructed at the ETP?
Yes, that's what I understand.
And is this in the same location as the existing carbon units?
That's correct.
And could you please highlight for members of the board information in this color diagram?
Mostly what I want you to realize is this is a more complex system than existing. The V512A and B are now separated in separate vessels. They'll have blowers to bring the vapors to them. There's quite a bit of piping. I won't try to chase it for you, but now we'll be able to run these carbon absorbers in series rather than in parallel as the existing ones, and they'll give better flexibility in operation, reliability.
Mr. Fawkes, could you please describe a parallel system and could you please describe parallel versus series?
I believe I can. Parallel operation, we have the two beds next to each other, and it's either one bed or the other, 20,000 pounds. In series, we'll run through 10,000 pounds in one vessel and then be routed to 10,000 pounds of the second vessel. That's in series. And what that allows us to do is monitor the VOC breakthrough in between vessels. So you'll never have a breakthrough. You'll see it in the first vessel, and then you'll be able to swap them and regenerate or replace the carbon in the one vessel that went over.
So arguably, the new carbon units would be more efficient and operate a little bit better than the existing carbon units.
That's correct. There also the switch over from RTO to carbon units will now be automatic instead of operator controlled. It'll have a MOV, I believe, or air operated.
Well, it certainly looks more complicated than the box structure that we saw in the photograph.
Madam Chair,
It is.
One moment, Senator, yes.
is he presenting a lot of information? At what point can we ask him a question?
I think once he's completed, unless you have a question specifically to
question,
clarify a
yeah.
particular.
We have
yes,
quite a bit of
please.
testimony left. If there's a question, we might want to take it now.
Go ahead,
Because
Senator.
this new carbon unit, it differs from the old one. And this one has a vapor blower, new carbon drum, and it's fiberglass vapor piping. That's different from the existing one, is that correct?
No, the existing is
Fiberglass
FRP
as
as well, yes.
Okay, that was my question.
Thank you. You can continue.
Thank you so much. Mr. Fox, should you please, do you have any more information to provide? And
Not on this. This later?
I'd say save that for later, yes. Mr. Fox, I referred this to my opening, but can the refinery stay in operation without the ETP in service?
I'm sorry, Mr. Norton, one moment.
Then what is
Senator.
the difference, significant difference, between this system and the carbon system and the other one?
The operability, so the existing one has two halves of 20,000 pounds of carbon, and we'd use one half at a time. To know when to replace that carbon is when you get breakthrough at the end of that carbon, and then we'd switch over to the other one. The new one will have two vessels of 10,000, so we still have 20,000 carbon in operation, but we'll have the ability to sample the vapors in between the two. And once the first vessel has breakthrough, we can swap them, and so you'll never have breakthrough to the atmosphere. In addition, there's some automated valves that when the RTO goes down, we'll be able to go to carbon much quicker than currently.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Mr. Norton, you may continue.
Thank you. And Mr. Fawkes, can the refinery stay in operation without the ETP in service?
No, the ETP must be in service in order to comply with wastewater discharge requirements in the NPDES permit prior to discharge to the Santa Monica Bay. If the ETP was taken out of service to replace the carbon units, then the refinery would have to shut down all of its operations to perform the work unless a variance is granted. The shutdown and subsequent restart of the refinery would result in emissions.
Let's move on to the variance request itself. Will Chevron be in violation of any district rules or orders in this matter?
Yes, Chevron is currently in compliance with relative district rules and regulations. But the refinery would be out of compliance with district rules and permit conditions when the carbon units are taken out of service for replacement.
And could you please describe the district rules and relevant permit conditions for this matter? And with not a lot of detail, because it's set forth in the petition.
Okay. Chevron is requesting coverage from District Rules 203B, 2004 F1, and 3002 C1 for the certain permit conditions as follows. Permit condition E 57.3 requires the operator to vent T500 and T719 to carbon absorbers V512A and B when the RTO is down. Permit condition D 90.11 requires the operator to periodically monitor VOC concentration at the outlet of the final carbon canister using method 21 every day the absorber is in use. Permit condition E 128.1 states the operator shall keep spent carbon in a tightly covered container. Permit condition E 153.4 states that the operator shall change over the carbon when the absorber, whenever breakthrough occurs. In addition, administrative condition number 2 requires the refinery to maintain the subject equipment in good conditions at all time. So Chevron can operate in compliance with these permit conditions when the carbon units are removed.
And I might mention the same information set forth in paragraph 9 of the written petition. Let's move on to,
Sorry, Mr. Norton. Senator, is this
It's pertinent.
it's not that it's not, whether it's pertinent or not, but is it a question to clarify something?
Yes.
Okay, please, go ahead.
ATP out of service, and if it's out of service, you mentioned that.
I think it was the carbon units which are going to go out of service, but
Then what about ATP? When is that? If that's going to be repaired, they talk about it being repaired or out of service for a period of time.
The testimony is we cannot take the ETP out of service without shutting down the refinery because wastewaters are produced in the processes at the refinery.
Then Exhibit 6 is the backup system to what?
Senator, we haven't gotten to Exhibit 6, so why don't we
You
proceed with,
discussed it.
we did not,
This discussion is based on Exhibit 6.
no, we stopped at Exhibit 5. So if we can allow the witness to proceed, then we can hold our questions.
And just to clarify, Senator, the effluent treatment plant is where the wastewater goes through, and that would stay in service during the period of the variance. We're only asking for a variance to take the carbon units out of service for replacement. What we're going to do is bring in the portable carbon units to act as a replacement during that period of time. But other than that, the refinery effluent treatment plant is going to operate as it is.
Which exhibit represent the portable ones?
We'll get there. It's at the portable ones, there's a photograph in exhibit number 4. In exhibit number 2, it's the third photograph or fourth photograph? Fourth photograph, excuse me, is a representation of the portable system. It's a very large system. And we'll get to a schematic of how they're installed in a few minutes in the testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fox, could we move on to the beyond reasonable control element?
Yes.
Is it beyond Chevron's reasonable reasonable control to comply in this matter?
Yes, compliance in this matter is beyond Chevron's reasonable control.
And why is that, Mr. Fox?
Chevron cannot maintain compliance with the carbon units while the carbon units are replaced. The facility permit shows tank T500 and tank T719 as being connected to the carbon units V512A and B. So Chevron cannot remain in compliance with all applicable district rules and permit conditions while those carbon units are being replaced.
Has Chevron recently worked to improve the performance of the RTO?
Yes, over the past few months, the refinery completed a major upgrade of the unit.
And what did Chevron do to improve the performance of the RTO?
Some of the key maintenance items completed during the outage included the following. The thermal oxidizer media beds were cleaned. The induced draft fan K714 was replaced with an upgraded design, and vibration monitoring was installed on the fan. Knockout drum B709, the vacuum breaker was repaired and the demister pad cleaned. Waste gas LEL analyzer was upgraded. The damper valves were overhauled, and repairs were made to the RTO ducting system. So the cleaning of the media bed and the overhauling of the damper valves should make the RTO more efficient, and the other maintenance work should make the RTO more reliable.
This sounds like a fairly big project in and of itself. Was it, Mr. Fowles, just to upgrade the RTO?
Yes, it was. The goal was to allow for a reliable 2-year run of the RTO. And if this goal is realized, the RTO should remain in service until the next planned maintenance outage, except for the one shift to replace the flow meter.
Well, let's get there. To your knowledge, will the RTO be shut down at any time during the variance period?
Yes, we plan to shut down the RTO for less than 1 day to install a new fuel meter at the RTO. This work should take about 1 shift to complete. This is a greenhouse gas meter that needs to be replaced. However, the portable carbon absorbers will be in place and ready for service when the RTO is down. As such, any emissions from the ETP will be treated by the portable carbon absorbers.
So the portable carbon absorbers would then be the backup to the RTO, just like the existing carbon units are serving, right?
That is correct.
Okay. Did Chevron discuss changes to the facility permit with the district to avoid the need for variance in this matter?
Yes, we attempted to resolve the compliance issue by means of a temporary changes to our facility permit, made as part of the open permit application at the refinery. Inquiries were made of the permitting for the portable carbon absorbers in place of the existing carbon units for the 6-month project. But after review, the proposal was rejected by the district. Staff did not want to make temporary changes to a Title V permit that would need to be revised after the project was completed. So after further discussions were held on the permit application, staff advised petitioner to obtain a regular variance to replace the carbon units.
We do have a witness prepared, Isaac Chang, to provide testimony on this discrete issue if warranted and requested by the hearing board members. Is there a regular inspection schedule for the subject equipment in this matter?
Yes, Chevron performs daily inspections of the carbon units when in service and accepting vapors from tanks T500 and tanks T719.
Please describe the maintenance performed on the subject equipment.
An external inspection of the vessel is performed every 5 years.
And when was the last maintenance performed on the subject equipment?
This month, October 2017, during maintenance, tank T500 diffusers were replaced.
I know you mentioned this, but let's hit excess emissions once again. Do you anticipate any excess emissions during the variance period?
No, there will be no excess emissions in this matter with mitigation. The vapors from T500 and T719 will be continued to be routed to the RTO during the variance period. The portable carbon absorbers will be brought into the refinery and connected to tanks T500 and T719 when the work is performed. If the RTO is shut down for any reason, then the vapors from these tanks containing VOCs will be routed to the district-permitted portable carbon absorption units.
Mr. Fowles, could I ask that you approach the overhead projector another time? And this might help with Senator Holden's question a bit. Mr. Fowles, is this a simple diagram of the temporary carbon adsorbers to be installed at the refinery during the variance period?
Yes, it is.
And could you please highlight for the members of the board information in the diagram?
Yes. These 4 lines on the left will be connected to T500, T719. And those vapors will be brought through these blowers marked B1 through B4. You notice there's 2 halves to it. Blowers B1 and B2 will go through vessels V1 and V2. Each of those 4 vessels has 5,000 pounds of carbon. And the photo we showed you in previous testimony was just showing basically 1/2 of this schematic. It showed 2 blowers and the 1 box that has the 2 V1 and V2. So there'll be 2 units like that shown in the photograph connected. Total will have 20,000 pounds of carbon that'll be treated just like the existing V512, V512B.
And the photograph you're referring to is the photograph that's been marked as, well, it's the first photograph in Exhibit 2, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, you can see, excuse me, it's the
No,
second
not-
photo, the fourth photograph. I apologize, it's the fourth photograph. in
Fourth
Exhibit 2.
photograph in Exhibit 2.
I should have each one of these labeled separately, apologize. And so I'm flipping to the fourth photograph in Exhibit 2, and I can see the end vent unit, and I can see the blower motors.
Right,
And that's similar to what we'd see installed at the ETP?
yes. Just twice, right. Yeah.
Got it.
Okay.
Anything more to offer here?
No, there isn't.
Thank you.
Senator has a clarification question.
Clarification. This diagram represent the blowers for one vessel or for two?
These will be the replacement carbon units. And like the photograph showed two blowers and one large box.
Right.
That's one half of what will be brought in. Two of those units will be brought in. So this diagram, B1, B2, V1, V2, is a schematic of what that photograph was. And there'll be a second identical unit like that with blowers B3, B4, and vessels V3, V4.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Norton, you may continue.
Thank you. Good job. Mr. Fowkes, do the portable carbon absorption units work as well or better than the existing carbon units?
Yes, if the portable carbon absorbers are placed in service because the RTO is down, then the emissions should be lower than normal during normal operations with the carbon units. With the use of these portable carbon absorbers, there should be no excess emissions.
Will Chevron continue to monitor for emissions during the variance period?
Yes, Chevron will monitor for VOC emissions during the variance period. Monitoring will be performed on the portable carbon absorbers when the RTO is down. The district permit for operation of the portable carbon absorbers also contain monitoring conditions applicable during the variance petition.
Will Chevron make this data available to the district?
Yes, we will. We can make the monitoring data available.
At this time, I'd like to introduce the revised proposed regular variance conditions. Those have been marked as
7.
Exhibit number 7. And just note that the parties have worked together on the proposed regular variance conditions. And just to reiterate a bit, can Chevron mitigate for excess emissions during this period?
Yes, Chevron will mitigate the excess VOC emissions to the maximum extent feasible during the variance period. During the variance period, district permitted carbon absorbers will be rented and available for use at the refinery when the existing carbon units are removed.
And I might mention that this is reflected in the proposed regular variance conditions. It requires the use of the portable carbon absorbers. Is it possible to curtail operations instead of seeking a variance in this matter?
No, Chevron has considered the option of curtailing or terminating its operations in lieu of obtaining a variance, but achieving compliance through curtailment is not an option here. The ETP must be in service in order to comply with the wastewater discharge requirements in the MPDS permit prior to discharge to the Santa Monica Bay. If the ETP was taken out of service to replace the carbon units, then the refinery would have to shut down all of its operations to perform the work. A variance is needed in this manner to perform the proposed maintenance work.
Would Chevron be harmed if the variance were not granted in this matter?
Yes, the denial of this variance would result in significant harm to Chevron. Economic loss to the refinery are estimated to be in excess of $2 million per day.
Could a reduction in fuel supplies from refinery potentially impact the public?
Potentially, a temporary shutdown of the refinery could affect our ability to supply gasoline to the market from the refinery.
What could happen to the subject equipment if the variance was denied?
If Chevron elected to forego the maintenance work and not replace the carbon units, then the refinery would be at risk for equipment failure. This could result in a breakdown of the carbon units with no excess VOC emissions. With the planned work, Chevron would have the portable carbon absorbers in place, working to prevent untreated gases from being emitted.
Could the environment potentially be harmed if the variance was denied in this matter?
Yes, significant emissions and flaring may occur if Chevron was forced to shut down and restart refinery units. In comparison, there would be no excess VOC emissions with the use of portable carbon absorbers. The granting of the variance would benefit the environment by avoiding the emissions related to the shutdown and subsequent restart of refinery units.
And regarding compliance, how does Chevron plan to achieve compliance, final compliance in this matter?
Chevron intends to achieve compliance by completing the maintenance work at the ETP as soon as possible.
And I'd like to, one more trip to the overhead projector, please, Mr. Fox. And I'd like to draw the hearing board's attention to what's been marked as exhibit number 8. It's titled Carbon Bed Installation V512A and B and K512A and B blowers. Mr. Fawkes, is this a, I guess you'd say, an accurate planned timeline for events for the carbon bed installation?
Yes, it is.
It's the best guess for the project, is in other words?
At the time it was made, yes.
And could you please highlight for the board information regarding the timeline that might be relevant to this matter?
Yeah, if I could, rather than go through each step or even every sub-step, the main point I would like to make is it's a very involved operation. They need to disconnect and demolish the existing V512s. There's a lot of surface preparation that needs to be made, electrical connections, electrical piping and stuff. At the bottom, you'll see that they expect the work to complete by June 5th, and this is after the new V512s are installed, and you saw that schematic earlier that it is quite more involved than the existing 512s.
Yeah, that makes sense, given the color diagram that you showed before.
Correct.
Anything more to add, Mr. Fawkes?
I don't think so.
Could you come on back?
Yes.
Thank you. And I won't send you up there again, I promise. I take it back. Would you?
Senator had a clarifying question.
Somewhere in your report, there's some statements or testimony regarding 6 months time frame for completing the project.
And thank you very much for asking that question. It leads up to our next question for the witness, which is on the time frame. Because at the time the petition was prepared and filed for notice requirements, that was quite some time ago. That was August 3rd is when this thing was actually filed, and we know more now.
But you still had a timeline of 6 months at that time, right?
We're going to ask for a little bit more time.
It appears that you are.
Yes, we're going to do that.
That's why I raised the question based on this, your timeline.
If we might, Mr. Fawkes, what is the time frame for achieving compliance in this matter?
We plan to start the work as soon as possible and be completed by June 5th. However, the date for completing the work is unknown. We could experience delays. We asked for 60 days following the projected completion date for the variance period. As such, Chevron requests that the regular variance period in this matter begin today and continue through August 4th, 2018. If we complete the work sooner, we will notify the clerk and the district that the final compliance has been achieved.
Is there any reason you believe?
Senator, if I would prefer that we fluidly allow Mr. Fox to finish his testimony and then ask questions rather than disruptively asking questions in
It's
the
on the
middle.
timeline. He's talking about the timeline.
I understand that, but at this point, we're going beyond, what's the date
I
on
know
this
some people
particular
don't like
thing?
my
That's
question, but that's
clarifying.
their problem.
I do not like your question,
It's not you,
Senator.
it's not
I'm
you.
trying,
I'm not talking about you.
merely trying to have an orderly process.
It is an orderly process.
Yeah, and
You said thanks for asking the question because there was somebody that wanted
it was a very timely question.
to,
But
timely and appropriate.
It's timely because he was leading to it. If we could allow the witness to complete his testimony, that would be better, as we always do in all of our proceedings.
If I didn't raise the question, he wouldn't have discussed the matter at all. I don't know how you do business around here sometime, but it seems like some people get special privileges.
I'm not sure what that means,
Well, it's
but
not
if we
germane
can,
to the
if we can
subject.
continue,
Well,
Mr. Norton.
I'm just here and observed.
I just want one, Senator, there is a time for everyone to ask every question they want. No one will be denied questions. I'm trying to just be orderly. Thank you.
Mr. Fowles, when do you expect the refinery would first need the variance coverage?
We're ready to go. All we need to move forward is the granting of the regular variance. We ask that the hearing board grant a variance that start as soon as possible.
And when would final compliance be achieved in this matter?
Final compliance will be achieved when aeration basin tank T500 and spent caustic tank T719 are reconnected to the new carbon absorbers.
And we're asking for 60 days after June 5th or August 4th for that time period?
That is correct.
Will the portable carbon absorption units remain in place during the variance period?
Yes, we plan to have the portable carbon absorbers installed and available to be placed in operation if the RTO should go down. There should be no excess emissions.
We did ask for a continuance of this matter due to a fire incident, and we'd like to provide some brief testimony on that for the members of the hearing board, granted that, we did seek and receive a continuance on that basis. Mr. Fowles, did a fire occur at the refinery last week?
Yes, on Tuesday, October 17th at about 10:30 p.m., Chevron responded to a fire at the refinery. Our first priority was to contain the incident and ensure the safety of its employees, emergency responders, and the community. The fire was quickly contained, and it was fully extinguished at about 11:18 p.m.
To your knowledge, were there any injuries?
No, there were no injuries that occurred as a result of this incident.
And where did the fire occur at the refinery?
The fire was contained to a distribution manifold adjacent to storage tanks located along the southwest perimeter of the refinery. The fire was not located close to any of the facility's main process units.
Did Chevron provide notice of the fire?
Yes, Chevron immediately notified all appropriate government agencies as part of their routine emergency response procedures. Representatives from local, state, and federal agencies were on site during the brief duration of the incident.
And has the root cause of the fire been determined?
No, it is not. The cause of the incident has not yet been determined. A team of subject matter experts has been assembled to investigate the cause.
To the best of your knowledge, will this fire incident, have any impact on the variance request or the replacement of the carbon units at the UTP?
No, we do not expect that the fire will have any impact on the project or the variance.
One last question, on nuisance, has the refinery received complaints regarding the subject equipment within the past 6 months?
No, the granting of the variance will not create a nuisance condition.
I have no more questions for this witness.
Thank you. Ms. Pruitt, do you have questions for this witness?
Now, is 9 months a reasonable estimate for the timeline required for the complete replacement?
I believe it is. I've never been a project manager, but you can see it is quite an involved process. Originally, we thought it was going to be 6 months. Starting soon, today or soon, we do expect it to take to June 5th. The additional time is just so that we don't have to come back here if we're a week late, right?
Now, can I ask you, what is the start time and how much lead time is needed to demolish and reconstruct?
They're prepared to go right now. I can't answer that directly, but I know they are prepared to go.
And when you say right now, you mean today?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, to your knowledge, is there any way that the project can be completed any sooner?
Not to my knowledge. It's certainly to our benefit to do the work as quickly as possible, as long as it can be done safely. So there's no driver to extend it. We have drivers to do the work quicker as possible. And if we can complete it sooner, we will complete it sooner.
Thank you. Is there any possible way to stagger the replacement to avoid the necessity of doing it all at the same time?
No, not in this case, and it's because really the only correct place to put the replacement, the new V512s, is in the exact same footprint of where the existing V512s are.
Thank you. Now, how old is the current effluent water treatment system?
I do not know. I should know, but I don't.
Yeah. Quick question.
Thank you.
I was first in the refinery in 1972, I believe, temporary hire, and ETP existed then, but it was different then. So of course, the refinery was built in 1911, and we had some wastewater treatment, but it wasn't the same then as it is now. I do not know when the existing configuration of ETP began.
So I guess my question then is, do you think that this should have been taken care of sooner?
No. We, we are in the middle of a large project to improve the ETP, so to reduce the amount of contaminants that are leaving the refinery in the wastewater. And this is part of that improvement.
And I believe you may have mentioned it, but what is the maintenance schedule for the system? The maintenance schedule?
For the V512,
Yes.
we're prepared to start now, and it's scheduled to end at June 5th.
No, I mean,
Oh, the RTO is scheduled, I'm sorry, the RTO is scheduled to have maintenance performed every 2 years. The tanks T719 and T500 are on a 5-year maintenance schedule.
and are you on schedule with your scheduled maintenance?
Yes, we are.
Now, are the portable carbon absorbers permitted?
Yes, they are. They have a AQMD various location permit. And yeah, they are included in the petition as Exhibit 3.
Now, just so we're clear, the wastewater treatment system ensures that the wastewater is treated prior to being put into the Santa Monica Bay. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, will the treatment requirements continue to be met during the variance period?
Yes, they will.
And is it correct that the portable units, should they be required to be used, would have no excess VOC emissions?
That is correct.
And related to the fire, there is an ongoing investigation?
I know the team is being assembled. I don't know if they've started to meet yet.
But to date, there is no completed information?
That is correct.
May I have one moment? May I have just a quick break just to speak to staff for a moment?
Would you like us to take our regular break now?
That's fine, thank you.
Okay, so why don't we take a 15-minute break, and we'll come back at 10:15.
Thank you.
We're back on the record. And Ms. Pruitt, I believe that you were taking some time to speak with district staff to see if you have any other questions.
Yes, thank you, and I do have one additional question.
Please go on.
Thank you. Mr. Fawkes, you mentioned that V512A and B carbon absorbers would be 10,000 pounds each in series. However, isn't it correct that there would be 20,000 pounds, which is identical to the present ones?
Yes, thank you for that. I did misspeak unintentionally. Each of the new V512 vessels will have 20,000 pounds of carbon, and they will be operated in series. And thank you for helping with that.
No.
The district has no further questions.
Board members? Okay, Ms. Byrd.
The fact that you are changing right now, the ETP, is that based on a requirement in your NPDES permit or anticipation of something?
Yes. I don't have a lot of direct knowledge to it, but in general, in renewal of our NPDES permit, making changes, and the PAC system is the
Okay.
main thrust of that. There are some additional works that are going on in the ETP, and the replacement of the V512 vessels are part of the additional work that's being done to basically upgrade the ETP.
Okay, so this wasn't just, it wasn't just you decided to do maintenance, it was based on a need to do maintenance.
Yes, that's my
Okay.
understanding.
And that eliminates some of my other questions. Could you just mention briefly the loss of 20 million per day? What's that based on? Is it based on product? Is it based
I
on?
believe the testimony is 2 million a day.
2 million, I'm sorry.
I
2
had a
million
shudder
a
go up
day.
and down my spine for a moment, excuse me.
Excuse me.
I wish. I ask in preparation for variance petitions, I ask our accounting people, our planners, for a figure. And honestly, they're reluctant to give an exact figure. So if you'll allow me to say, it'll be in excess of $2 million a day.
And that's based on loss of production, that's based on what exactly?
I don't know every factor, but that's the biggest, loss of production. There's expenses that, we're starting up, shutting down, but primarily loss of production.
Okay. In the emissions that are lower than the normal in the portable, in the petition, there's a copy of the permit. Can you show me exactly, I missed it, where it says what the emissions would be and tell me the comparison between the current and the portables?
Our current carbon adsorbers have an emission limit by permit condition of 500 parts per million VOC at the outlet. The rental units, it would take me a minute or two to find it, but it is much lower. It's less than 10, I believe. So for that reason, these will be operated to a tighter standard.
If you could, or if someone could point you to that, tell me on what page of the permit it says that?
If you give us
That
just a
would be
minute,
less than 500?
we'll get there.
Okay.
Do you see it? There's the inlet.
I see.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I see on the second page of Exhibit 1, I believe, well, I'll let the witness answer.
So if I can direct you to Exhibit 3, and that's the permit to operate
For the portables,
for
right?
the invent.
Okay.
And you look at the permit conditions on page 4, permit condition number 19,
It's the one on the very bottom.
Okay.
the one on the very bottom. The concentration of VOCs at the final outlet shall not exceed 8 parts per million.
Okay. And then it says applicable limit shall be 500 ppm. The comparison between the existing permit and this permit is what I'm looking for. And I'm not sure if you're comparing the same things.
Well, let me help you a bit. If you look at exhibit number 1, it's the description of the RTO, which is on page 42 up at the top.
Okay, yep,
It'll say emissions and requirements. And if you follow down, you'll see 500 ppm under VOC.
VOCs, And then when I go to the, okay, so you're saying that
This
this
is
has
what we're-
8 ppm as
this-
opposed to 500, is that
Well,
what
we're
you're saying?
allowed to emit 500 ppm under the permit,
Right,
and under the portable system, it only allows us to emit 8.
okay, I just wanted to make sure, it just seemed so drastically different, I thought maybe I was not reading it correctly. Okay,
I had the same question when I saw it first as well.
okay. Is there any of this equipment in any way related to the fire?
No, this is all planned.
No, I mean as far as downstream from the operation, or is anything related to the
No,
fire?
it's unrelated.
Nothing, okay. And you mentioned that you were not the project manager who developed the project timeline in Exhibit 8? Is that what did I hear you say that?
Yeah,
Okay.
I was given an excuse, I'm sorry.
Okay. No, I just wanted to make sure, and because that made me wonder, well, who was, and you can't answer why it takes 9 months because you're not the project manager.
Yeah, he wasn't available to come with us today.
Well, me to interject just a bit, I think that's not quite characterizing Mr. Fouke's testimony. He did go through the schedule and talk about the various complexity of it, and said that June 5th is the projected date, but for
Right.
contingencies, 6 months. So I think that, you know, at least a fair amount of testimony was provided on the activities under the timeline and what's expected for the carbon bed replacement project. Certainly, we could, you know, you could always get, we could always get further in depth, but I do think that some
It's
testimony.
okay, I just know that the district had asked a question about, was it possible to do it in less than 9 months? And I remembered that the witness had said that he wasn't the project manager, so he didn't know why it took 9 months. So that made me wonder, did it really have to be 9 months?
He also responded to a question where he thought it was reasonable for the 9 months, and he did say yes.
Right, right. Yeah, I got that too. You mentioned, Mr. Fox, that there is a benefit to completing the project sooner. Is that correct?
Sure, and just construction costs,
Okay, so that's just the construction
less
cost. There's-
people employed and
Okay.
all the,
It has
cost.
nothing to do with a need to meet your permit requirements for
no,
discharge?
it doesn't, just purely construction costs.
Okay, let's see. I think that's maybe it. Thank you.
Mr. Camarena?
Ms. Byrd has asked most of the questions I had. I have just one area of inquiry, and that is on exhibit number 6.
Oh, okay.
The, between vessels 1 and 2, and between vessels 3 and 4, will your monitoring be continuous or periodic?
Periodic, we're going to meet both permit conditions as if they were our own V12 carbon absorbers, and in addition, the conditions required by InVent's various locations permit. And I would have to look to see what their monitoring requirement is, but we will meet that requirement.
Do you know what the frequency of,
I would have to read through the permit conditions again, I don't recall.
Would you give us a minute? We could
Sure.
respond. Thank you.
don't see the time. Oh. Okay, I'm prepared to answer. Exhibit 3, invents, permit to operate, condition 17, which is on page 4. The operator shall measure and record the concentrations of VOCs at inlet and outlet. And, describe the analyzer to be used. And the frequency is at least once every 4 hours when the equipment is being used for control.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Byrd?
I'm sorry, I knew I had another question. So the new equipment, the new carbon adsorbers, the units will have what emissions that eventually will take them to lower, at what level? Okay, let me back up. The difference between the old and the new, what will the emissions be on the
emission
replacement?
limit will be the same.
It will be the same.
Yes.
So, okay, so is it just then that your permit is requiring a different method of reducing the emissions, or?
I think I'm answering correctly. The only need for this variance is the requirement of having T500 and T719 connected to V512A and B. And while we connect to temporary and deconstruct the existing ones and construct the new ones, we can't meet that requirement. It won't be connected to. We'll be connected to temporaries.
And I understand, I guess, as part of the beyond, I'll give you a little bit of why I'm going here. As part of the beyond reasonable control, I'm trying to understand what requirement you have to do this now. And so I'm trying to understand if you're replacing the equipment with equipment that will have the same emissions, what is bringing you to do that now?
Again, it's part of the entire ETP improvement project. And there are benefits to the new one, being able to operate them in series.
In series, right?
The automatic valving, and there's some other benefits I can't remember right now.
I just thought that you said your NPDES permit was requiring that you do something, and I was just trying to understand if that was
The
prompting.
new permit has lower threshold limits that we must meet. The PAC project is the way we're going to do that. While we're doing the PAC project, there are other improvements to the ETP that are being done, and this is one of them.
Okay, so this improvement to the ETP is not based on this carbon absorption replacement unit project is not based on your need to do this for your NPDES.
That is correct.
Okay, I misunderstood your testimony before. I was trying to get to why it was right now that you were doing this, but you're doing it as a result of an overall project.
That is correct.
And the overall project requires a decrease in the emissions?
Yes, and wastewater emissions.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
There is nothing wrong or in violation or in need of replacement of the current carbon absorptions other than a desire for upgrades?
That is correct.
Okay. When you mentioned that the rental units have not yet been procured and placed on site, is that correct? The carbon absorption units, the portables?
I talked to our project manager last week, not this week, and they were not yet placed on site. They are secured, they're contracted to be there, and we will connect them up prior to removing the V512s.
Okay, so do you have any idea when you anticipate them to be on site?
When we get the go-ahead from this variance, they'll get a phone call.
Okay. And the reason why I ask is because the request is for the variance to begin today. But proposed condition number 1 states that Chevron shall rent and install district-permitted portable carbon absorbers to be used, but doesn't say at all times. And given that if we grant a variance today, and today you can go demolish and disconnect the carbon absorption units, I want to just make sure that that language is in there so that you're waiting. I assume you will, but I want to make sure that's clear.
Absolutely no objection. That's always been our intent, that the portable carbon absorbers would be in place during the period of the variance. So no objection to additional language saying at all times.
It would probably be at all times when the carbon units are being replaced, or at all times when the carbon units are disconnected and not in operation, or something of that nature.
That's perfectly acceptable.
Okay. The other questions I had to do with the conditions of your permit from which you are requesting a variance. And there are two that I think may not be necessary and may in fact be somewhat overreaching. The first one would be, and unless you can explain to me why these would be violated. Let's look at facility permit section H, condition E153.4, which states that the operator shall change over the carbon in the absorber whenever breakthrough occurs. Do you anticipate that once the carbon units are taken out of service and demolished, that there will be breakthrough?
Certainly not. There will be no breakthrough because they won't be in use. And when I prepare these petitions, I want to make sure I include all conditions, so I am
Understood.
probably over-conservative.
I just want to make sure we don't unintentionally allow some type of variance of not changing carbon absorber. I understand that the conditions require on the new unit or the replacement, the rental unit, the portable, to change the carbon whenever breakthrough occurs. But if it's not called for, so it's something for you to consider, and whether you still want to ask for that.
I think we could probably live without this one.
Okay, thank you. And then similarly, the one above it, E128.1, I just want to understand, because this one states that the operator shall keep spent carbon in a tightly covered container. I would assume that's important if any spent carbon still exists there. But if it won't, because there will be no unit, then I don't know that we would want to give a variance, let alone need to give a variance.
Agreed. We are allowed to take, to replenish the carbon is the only time it's not kept in a closed container, because you got to remove the carbon, put them into drums for removal. And that activity will occur, but it is allowed by our current permit. Again, it was being overly cautious.
Right, so there's never, just so we're clear, there's never going to be a situation when spent carbon will not be in a tightly covered container unless otherwise allowed anyway by the permit.
That's correct. Part of the demolition of the existing V512s will be to remove the carbon, just as we would if it were spent carbon and into other closed containers, so.
Okay, so then I'll leave it to Mr. Norton to determine whether that,
We can live without it.
okay, thank you. The extra 2 months, is there any reason today that you believe, other than construction doesn't normally go as planned, that you anticipate that you will need that extra 2 months?
No, we don't anticipate. Our project manager feels comfortable he can meet the June 5th. It's actually so we just don't have to come back here again and explain why we need additional time.
We just had the SR 73 project, which came back again and again and again to this hearing board. We were just trying to avoid a repeat of that for administrative efficiency.
Thank you, Mr. Norton. Those are my questions. Other board members have questions? Just to remind the senator, all questions are very important questions, and the fact that we ask for questions at a particular time from board members is merely a point of order, not how important or unimportant they are.
Could have asked this question earlier, but I'll ask it now. The ASU unit, you didn't explain that at all during your testimony.
The existing V512A,
You
oh, the ASU?
didn't talk about it.
T500 and some other equipment are part of the activated sludge unit. The effluent treatment plant, ETP, has different sections to them. One section is the activated sludge unit, or we call it the ASU. Part of the ASU includes T500, the carbon beds V512.
So it's temporary removal of the replacement of certain carbon absorption unit.
I think what the testimony is reflected is that the subject equipment is part of the activated sludge unit, but we're not asking for variance for all of it. We're just asking for variance for part of it.
You also mentioned that the temporary carbon units are more efficient than the regular system.
Yes, they are. And that's because of the permitted allowance of VOC emissions on the outlet is much stricter than our current ones.
Why not use them all at all times then?
The rental ones,
Yeah,
they're very expensive to rent.
but they're more efficient.
They're very expensive.
Okay. You have a permit from the, to discharge emission into Santa Monica Bay, is that correct? You do?
Of our wastewaters, yes.
Wastewater.
We have a NPDES permit to do so.
Were you ever cited for dumping excessive waste into the water bay?
I do not know. I only deal with air regulations and not water and waste regulations.
Your response to one of the questions was that that's probably one of the reasons why you're having all these changes.
In obtaining a new permit, which they renew, I don't even know the frequency, it's part of the requirements is to reduce emissions in the wastewater, and that's the reason for the PAC project that we're doing.
You're trying to get a new permit from whom?
Regional Water Quality Control Board, I
Yeah,
believe.
yeah.
Yeah.
And you have to satisfy them that your new configuration will reduce the emission into the bay, is that correct?
I don't have specifics on that. I know that's the purpose of the project, and I don't have specifics. I don't know what agreements were made or how that came about.
I might offer that the permit does have discharge limits for various pollutants, and they have to test those pollutants. So it's not just a matter of projecting out what it should be like. They actually have to test it regularly, the wastewater.
Did Chevron monitor the emissions into the bay, or did they?
I know we do that,
No.
yes.
You do?
We do not want to discharge pollutants into the bay.
So you monitor it?
We monitor the waters.
Yes.
And so at no time did you exceed, to your knowledge, the amount specified in the permit?
I can't answer that question. I just don't have knowledge of our wastewater regulations.
It's not before us, but I'm saying what's the project here is going to require reduction in the emission into the bay. And there's a reason why they're asking that be done, perhaps, and you don't have the answers.
That's correct. I only know the purpose of the project. I do not know the specifics of how the project came about or the requirements of the NPDES permit. That's not my expertise.
And the time frame to complete the project, you've gone from 6 months to 9 months?
So we do expect,
The additional,
we wish to start now or, very soon. We do expect to complete by June 5th. We are asking for additional time
beyond June 5th.
only so that if we get delayed on the project by a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks due to unforeseen events, we wouldn't have to come back here and ask for additional time. In our variance conditions, we will notify the board and the district when we start, when we finish, so, and we will finish as soon as practical.
In my short time here, I've seen some agreements made, stipulated order, stipulated this, stipulated that, and the language is not an abatement, I know.
I'm sorry, can we have just whoever the member is asking questions, please speak at one time? Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you for the courtesy. I'm going to be mindful of the fact that whatever we eventually agree to, that it must be adhered to without any strict language. And I think you understand the point I'm making.
We do, and for that reason, we've prepared the proposed regular variance conditions and negotiated those with the agency. And though those proposed regular variance conditions, which are enforceable, are before you for review and modification.
They have been revised, just for the record, and they are revised and appear in Exhibit 7. Any other questions, Senator? Any other questions, board members? Seeing none, Mr. Norton, do you have another witness?
We do have one witness prepared to talk about the Title V, the request to modify the permit. And then, of course, you've heard from Mr. Fowkes that the district did not want to modify a Title V permit on a temporary basis, just to go back and change it. We have some testimony to provide on that. It's just, does the hearing board want it? I think we could probably live without it then.
Does the district want to hear that testimony? Does any member of the board wish to hear that testimony?
Only if you think you need it to make your case, that's up to you.
No, it's really just to satisfy the curiosity of the hearing board members.
I think Mr. Fox's testimony was sufficient. Thank you. So no other witness?
No other witnesses, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Pruitt, does the district wish to offer any witnesses?
No, Your Honor. Excuse me. Yes,
It's fine.
a criminal background, sorry.
I'll take it. Okay, so I'm going to ask at this time if any member of the public wishes to be heard. Seeing none, Mr. Norton, your closing, please.
Thank you very much. I do believe that sufficient testimony and other evidence has been provided that the hearing board could make the 6 findings in this matter. I won't try to make the 6 findings. You do that so much better than I do. I'll just reiterate some points that were made during the hearing, is that this really has to do with this ETP project, the effluent treatment plant project, which is a large project for the refinery. I think you heard testimony that the NPDES permit now has some new limits, new discharge limits that the refinery needs to meet. So they're redesigning their ETP, including the installation of the pulverized activated carbon, or PAC unit, to be able to meet the new limits and improve the quality of the wastewater leaving the refinery. And that the replacement of the carbon units is just a part of that project. I think you've heard testimony that the overall ETP project has project costs estimated at about $65 million. And of that, the replacement of the carbon units alone is $6 to $7 million. Due to plot limitation, Chevron will need to construct the replacement carbon units in the same location as the existing one. They can't just build it off to the side and tie it over, which is what would be preferred. Thus, the length of the variance is longer than we would prefer. But during the course of the variance, nothing will happen, essentially. The portable carbon adsorption units, which are district permitted, will be replaced. Will replace the carbon units. They'll be sitting off to the side. The RTO will do most of the work. It's just been rebuilt. It's expected to have a 2-year run. So the expectation from the refinery is that the portable carbon units will sit there idle unless needed, and the RTO will do the work. There will be a short period of time where a new fuel meter is installed at the RTO, which will require the use of the portable carbon units. But most of the time during the variance period, they're just going to be sitting there connected to the system, satisfying the requirements of the variance, and would be a backup device of the RTO if it goes down for any reason. I think you've also heard testimony that the district permitted portable carbon units will not only be installed during the period of the variance, but work as well or better than the existing units. The permit limitation, I believe, is 500 ppm for VOC for the dedicated equipment, but for the portable equipment, it's only 8 parts per million. You've also heard testimony and supported by the evidence that with mitigation, there would be no excess emissions in this matter, and that significant harm would result if the variance were not granted. The wastewater system is integral with refinery operations. The refinery cannot operate without the ability to discharge wastewater. If the variance is not granted, economic losses of the refinery would be in excess of $2 million per day. I think you've heard testimony that Chevron is sensitive to give an absolute number on that, but it is a high number. Moreover, emissions and flaring would likely result if the variance were denied and Chevron was forced to shut down and restart refinery units. In comparison, there should be no excess emissions if this variance is granted. So this is one of the rare occasions where granting of a variance would benefit the environment. We ask that the replacement work start as soon as possible, and we project it would be completed by June 5th, but that is just a project projection. These things are often delayed, and we're asking for 60 days following the completion date of the project of June 5th or to August 4th for the end date of the variance. I mentioned in my opening that the actual time under the variance may be shorter. I think Mr. Fowkes offered some testimony that deserves to be repeated. There are literally going to be hundreds of people involved in this project, and it's very expensive. The sooner that Chevron can complete the project, the better for the refinery. They have every incentive to try to complete the project as quickly as possible and come into final compliance in this matter. The additional 60 days following the completion date is really designed so we just don't have to come back unnecessarily. And with that, I'll rest. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Pruitt, your closing.
Yes, the district is unopposed to the variance as the information and the testimony presented is consistent with the district's understanding. Thank you.
Thank you. Board members, discussion? Mr. Camarena, Senator?
I saw the senator move to his mic button. I thought he was going to offer. I'll need some help on the first one because I didn't take full notes on it, and I believe that the petitioner will be in violation of district regulations as set forth in its petition on page 4 with the following exceptions. And Madam Chair, I'll need some help on that.
Yes, I'm happy to aid in that discussion. First of all, of course, the district rules 203B, 2004 F1, and 3002 C1, based on the fact that they have permit, Title V permit, and our reclaim facility, and then three other conditions, which are E 57.3, D 90.11, and Section E administrative condition number 2, all having to do with essentially the fact that this carbon absorption unit is expected by permit to be the backup to the RTO, and it will not be. And so periodic testing cannot take place, it cannot be hooked up, and it's not full and functioning.
Thank you. And due to conditions beyond the reasonable control of the petitioner requiring compliance would result in the practical closing and elimination of a lawful business, petitioner is in need of upgrading its ETP and is making that a part of a larger project. Without the ETP, it cannot legally dispose of its wastewater, and if it can't do that, it can't operate the refinery. The closing would be without a corresponding benefit in reducing air contaminants. The testimony we've heard is that I got that a little backwards. During the period of the variance, the petitioner will be using temporary carbon absorbers whenever the RTO is out of service, and so during that period of time, there will be lesser emissions than there otherwise would be if the variance were not granted and if they were in operation. The applicant for the variance has given consideration to curtailing operations of the source in lieu of obtaining, and in this particular case, no reduction in operations will be a cure for the problem. They do need to upgrade their ETP. During the period of the variances in effect, the applicant will reduce excess emissions to the maximum extent feasible. And as we heard, that not only will there be no emissions, well, there will be no excess emissions during the period of the variance. During the period of the variance, the applicant will monitor or otherwise quantify emission levels as provided in the proposed conditions, which are exhibit number 7. And there are no excess emissions. That concludes my review of the findings.
Thank you. I agree with the findings, and I believe that the findings can be made. I only disagree with finding number 2 with regard to conditions beyond the reasonable control and it being a practical closing and elimination of a lawful business as opposed to an arbitrary or unreasonable taking of property. And the reason why is because my understanding of the testimony is that while the ETP upgrade is necessary, the replacement of the carbon absorption units is not necessary to the ETP replacement. It's part of the overall ETP project, and it's desired by the facility, by Chevron, to upgrade the carbon units as part of that for better efficiency, for the ability to do the 2 beds in series and to be able to, I guess, test for, I forget the name of what it's called, but for any excess emissions, however, for VOC, thank you, breakthrough, between the 2 units, A and B. So given that, I don't believe that denial of the variance to do that would be denial or the closing of elimination of a lawful business. Well, it could be. The way I look at it as is it's up to Chevron to make that decision, to make the upgrade. Where it is beyond their reasonable control is that they don't have enough space and they have to construct that new system or the new units where the old units sit. And so if we do not grant a variance, if they don't get a variance, they can't do that. So either they're denied the ability to do the upgrades, or they have to shut down the entire plant, the entire facility, because everything has to go through the ATP. So that would be an arbitrary, well, that would be maybe a closing elimination of a lawful business, but it really would be a taking of property, I think, more than that, because it would be taking whatever, if it's 2 million a day, if it's more or less, whatever it is, it would still be quite significant taking of property to have to close down. And I think it would also be a taking to not allow the upgrade. So that's how I see that. Anyone else want to add? Senator?
Exhibit 7 doesn't specify a time frame, and I'm not prepared to give you something that's open-ended. So we have to.
There is no motion yet with the term of the variance, but what's been requested is present through August 4th, I believe, of 2018. I think what's requested when a motion is made is present through today through August 4th of 2018. It's not in the proposed conditions. It's part of the request, though. Any other discussion on the findings? Ms. Byrd?
I just wanted to say that for the emissions reduction, because I saw this and I didn't think it was right, that during the period of the variance, the portable units are so much more efficient than the existing units. And so any, even for that one shift that they're proposing to install a meter on the RTO, that the emissions would be so much less than they would be normally. So they have definitely reduced the excess emissions to the maximum extent feasible.
Anyone else? Discussion on the findings? Would anyone like to offer a motion? Mr. Camarena?
In the matter of Chevron Products Company, case 831-388, I move that we adopt a regular variance commencing forthwith and continuing through August 4th, 2018 from the rules and regulations set forth on page 4 of the petition as modified by what was read into the record by Chair Prusak, and the variances from the equipment set forth on page 2 of the petition. These are the tank aeration basin T500, tank T719, the spent caustic tank, carbon absorbers V is in Victor 512A and V is in Victor 512B, and also the thermal oxidizer F707. The equipment is located at 324 West El Segundo Boulevard in El Segundo, California, and the conditions are as set forth on Exhibit 7. And there are no excess emissions. That concludes my motion.
Thank you. Is there a second? Ms. Byrd?
I'll second.
Just for the record, because I know, Mr. Camarena, you had asked me to be a little more clear. So just for the record and for findings and decision later on and any minute order, it is conditions E128.1 from Section H of the facility permit and E153.4 of Section H of the facility permit that are no longer being requested to be part of the variance. And I wonder if the parties and Mr. Camarena, if you would accept a change to condition 1 on Exhibit 7 to read, Chevron shall rent and install district permitted portable carbon absorbers to be used and to add at all times in place of the existing carbon absorbers V-512A and V-512B, in parentheses, carbon units, adding when the carbon units are disconnected and not in operation, and then changing the word when to while the carbon units are being replaced. So again, it would read, I hope this makes sense. Chevron shall rent and install district-permitted portable carbon absorbers to be used at all times in place of the existing carbon absorbers, and it states which ones they are, when the carbon units are disconnected and not in operation while the carbon units are being replaced.
That's acceptable.
And Ms. Pruitt, is that acceptable to the district?
No objection.
And Mr. Camarena, is that acceptable to you?
Yes.
And Ms. Byrd, is that acceptable as the second?
Yes.
Is there any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none. Senator, how do you vote? Oh, did you state the time frame?
Yes.
Yes. He stated the time frame as beginning today and continuing through August 4th, 2018. And since we're having the discussion now on the motion, I wanted to say, and I should have said, that while I did ask the question of why the extra 2 months, and I know other members of the board asked why the extra 2 months, I am satisfied that there are no excess emissions, and in fact, the portable units are cleaner. And this is just in case so that we don't have to return for construction delays should they occur, for usual construction delays should they occur, and that the testimony is it is expensive to rent these units, and is incentives in place for quick construction. Mr. Camarena?
And during that extra time, it is those temporary carbon units that will be in operation when the RTO is out of service, which is a better situation than the current.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the motion before we vote? Senator, how do you vote? Dr. Lerner, how do you vote?
Aye.
I vote yes. Ms. Byrd, how do you vote? I know you
Yes.
seconded. And Mr. Camarena? I know.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Board members, I had one other just quick announcement or request. The clerk has asked that if board members plan to be absent either for doctor's appointment, any vacation that's planned to be had, please let Denise know as soon as possible. And that's all I have. Anyone else have any other business? We are adjourned.